Imagine stumbling upon a legal code, a really old one. We're talking over 3,000 years ago. But this isn't just about big crimes like theft or violence. It gets into the nitty-gritty of everyday guilt. Like what happens if you make a promise you totally forgot about? Or you accidentally touch something that's considered, well, unclean. Today, we are cracking open an ancient guide to making things right, and you'll see it has some ideas that feel surprisingly modern.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at what even counted as an unintentional sin. Then we'll get into this really cool tiered system of offerings they had. After that, we'll zoom in on a special kind of offense, trespassing against holy things. And finally, we'll wrestle with a real head-scratcher. Can you be guilty if you had no idea you did anything wrong?
So, where's all this coming from? Our source is the book of Leviticus, chapter 5. And let me tell you, this thing reads less like a story and more like a super detailed legal manual. It's like a rule book for a whole community trying to keep things in balance, both socially and spiritually. It's all about repairing the little rips and tears in the fabric of their society.
All right, first up, unintentional sins. Now, we're not talking about premeditated, planned-out crimes here. This law is all about the everyday mistakes, the oops moments that can happen to literally anyone. But in their view, even those little slip-ups created a kind of imbalance that needed to be fixed.
And what's really wild is how wide a net these rules cast. They cover your civic duty, like if you witnessed something but failed to testify. They cover ritual rules, like accidentally touching a dead animal. See, in their world, anything associated with death was a disruption to life and holiness. And they cover your personal word, making a thoughtless promise, a rash oath that you just can't keep. It's a really complete view of what it means to be responsible. So before any offering, before any ritual, what's the very first step? It all starts with you. You had to realize you made a mistake and then actually say it out loud. You had to confess. This was the absolute foundation of the whole process. You can't fix a problem you won't even admit you have.
Okay, so you've confessed, now what? This is where the system gets really smart. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all punishment. It was actually designed so that anyone, and I mean anyone, could make things right, no matter how rich or poor they were.
And check out this tiered system. It just shows how fair the whole thing was meant to be. The goal was to atone, not to go broke. So if you're well off, you bring a lamb. If you can't swing that, no problem, 2 birds will do. And if even that's a stretch, you could bring a small amount of fine flour, maybe about what you'd use to bake a few loaves of bread. Clearly what mattered was the sincerity of the act, not how much it cost.
The rituals themselves were different too. If you brought birds, the priest did a whole 2-part ceremony. But if you brought flour, the rules were strict. No oil, no incense. That was a clear signal. This wasn't an offering to celebrate something. It was specifically a sin offering. Every little detail had a purpose.
Now the system gets even more granular, because not all oops moments were seen as the same. The law carves out a special category for sacred trespasses. These were offenses not against another person, but against something that was considered holy.
So, what does that mean exactly? Well, think of it like accidentally misusing funds that were set aside for a sacred purpose. Maybe someone used grain that was supposed to be an offering, or took something from the community treasury without realizing it. This wasn't just a personal mistake. It was seen as an offense against the whole community and the divine.
So to make this right, you had to do 2 things. First, you'd bring a ram as a guilt offering. But that only took care of the spiritual side. Because a real physical thing was lost, you also had to pay it back with a little extra on top.
And right here we see a legal concept that is a cornerstone of our justice systems today: restitution. It wasn't enough to just say you were sorry. Nope, you had to make the other party whole again. And that extra 1/5, that 20% penalty, that was to make sure the offense was taken seriously.
And that brings us to our final section. And honestly, it's a real puzzle. We've covered what happens when you realize you've messed up. But what if you break a rule and you have absolutely positively no idea you did it? Is ignorance innocence?
Well, the text doesn't beat around the bush. It says, though he wist it not. That's just old-fashioned language for even though he didn't know it, yet is he guilty. Whoa, that is a pretty profound statement about responsibility. In this worldview, your actions can have consequences that make you guilty, regardless of whether you meant to do it or were even aware of it.
So, the second that unknown sin comes to light, maybe something happens later and you finally put 2 and 2 together, the process of making it right has to begin. This wasn't about punishing someone for being clueless. It was about restoring a sense of order to the community and the cosmos, an order that was disrupted by the act itself.
So there you have it, a quick dive into this fascinating ancient code. And it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? When you think about concepts like restitution or the legal debates we have over negligence versus intent, how many of these 3,000-year-old principles for making things right are still echoing in our own systems of law and ethics today?